The entire contents of this podcast and website are based upon the opinions of Tammy Garcia and her guests, unless otherwise noted. The information on this podcast is not intended to replace a one-on-one relationship with a qualified healthcare professional and is not intended as medical advice. It is intended as a sharing of knowledge and information from the research and experience of Tammy Garcia and her guests. This is the Naturally Inspired Podcast, coming to you from our 1890 homestead in Johnstown, Colorado. I'm Tammy, and I want to thank you for joining us. Let's get started and help people feel good so they can do what they love for longer. Today on the Naturally Inspired Podcast, we have Shae Invidiata joining us. Shae is the founder of Free Them, a not-for-profit organization dedicated to raising awareness and funds to abolish human trafficking in Canada and abroad by partnering with people, businesses, organizations to fight human trafficking. This is a very important podcast. Human trafficking is a $150 billion industry. It targets the most impoverished and vulnerable people in our world. You will be shocked to learn how young people are lured into this horrific nightmare. It is disturbing and it's ugly. But if we are ever to stop this evil, we must first acknowledge that it exists. So I hope you will take this podcast and share it with as many people as you can. This is Shae Invidiata with Free Them on this episode of the Naturally Inspired Podcast. Thank you so much, Shae, for being on the Naturally Inspired Podcast today. My fellow Canadian here. Yeah. I'm so happy to have Canadians on. Yeah. How's Toronto treating you right now?
Well, it's cold, and from where you're sitting, I'll give you a little tidbit about Colorado. Whatever the weather's happening in Colorado happens here in Toronto like 4 days later. So when you guys get snow, it's like, okay, I know it's coming. When you guys have mild weather, I'm like, okay, the cold is going to lift. And so, I was sharing with you a little bit how my best friend is in Colorado. She's in the Springs. And so I'm constantly being like, okay, you have beautiful weather today. That's awesome. Right now, it is, it's pretty cold. It's -10 for us, which is probably about like 20 degrees, maybe even lower than that. Maybe like, I don't know, 17 degrees for you guys. So it's cold, Yeah.
I think we're going to actually have a new early spring, even though, the groundhog said we have 6 more weeks. I'm not buying it because I can smell spring coming when in Colorado. I know when it's coming and it feels like it's coming. So hopefully you will get an early spring too.
Well, like I said, if you're getting it, I'm getting it 4 days later. I'll take it.
Yeah, that's crazy. So I invited you on today so we could talk a little bit about this topic of that you're so involved with. It's human trafficking. And wow, this is like an intense subject. And I think that it has gotten more awareness brought to it over the last couple of years. And we're going to talk about that through the podcast. But first, let's discover, Shae, how you got involved in advocating for human rights and being a part of this issue to stop human trafficking.
Yeah, so my journey started back when I was 18 years old, going back to 2003. So if you do the math, you know how old I am. And I had moved to the island of Oahu, which is, home to Waikiki and Honolulu, as many people know. And that's where I started my university education. And if you've been there before, you know that there's 3 main roads that parallel the ocean. And the middle one is known as Kuhio Avenue. And if you stay there long enough, you'll come to learn it's known as Candy Lane. And it was on this street that our dorm was situated. And so they had taken one of the hotels and half operated as a hotel and the other half operated as dorms. And literally across the street from me was, I'd see the transformation of the street happen. And it would become the track, which is just, a place where girls are walking, basically offering sex. And by day, you'd see families with their kids in board shorts and surfboards. And by night, you would see this transformation to girls that looked much younger than me, who were practically half naked, walking on the strip there.
Wow.
And being that I was so young, and seeing girls that looked so much younger than me, like 13, 14, 15 years old. And most females would agree that a 13-year-old who puts on red lipstick and like a pair of high heels can very easily look like they're 18, 19, 20.
Yeah.
And so being that I was 18 at the time, seeing these girls that really looked younger than me, I wanted to understand why. Why would a girl choose to be in this? And regardless of what your position is, if you think prostitution is right or wrong, for me, it was irrelevant. I really wanted to understand why. And this is what took me down a path. It was about 3 years of my life. I lived on the island for just over 3 years, 3.5 years. And during that time period, I started to get to know these girls. And that was like through many different ways that I was able to do that. But I started to learn about their stories, and I started to learn about the fake modeling agency that didn't exist on Oahu when they showed up there. I learned about the job opportunities that they were promised from Minnesota, LA, New York, etc. And when they showed up there, it didn't exist. I learned about even the men that were promised over in Thailand opportunity for jobs on Oahu, and were being exploited for forced labor, like on the island of Oahu. And so what I started to learn through these stories is that, and specifically with the girls, that the word prostitute that we equate so much with choice was widely being misrepresented, and the more accurate word to be using is prostituted. And so when you learn that word, and at the time, I actually didn't learn, and back then, just to give some context, Stephen, governments were not talking about human trafficking.
Right.
Politicians weren't talking about human trafficking. The media didn't even know what it was. It was a Hollywood word. And it was a word that was used in, movies like Born into Brothels. That was more of an indie film, a documentary film that happens over in India and does not happen in the two most free nations on our planet, being I was Canadian living in the United States, right? So the context even of that word was not relevant in the US. It certainly wasn't relevant in Canada either. And so it was very much not understood. And so everything I was learning about these girls, as I mentioned, from the false jobs that didn't exist when they showed up, or the forced abortions, to the boyfriend that promised them a dream vacation of a lifetime, and it turned out to be their worst living nightmare, quite literally, to the forced augmentation procedures. And everything in hearing their stories, I was like, wow, these girls were lured and coerced, and then were being held against their will to be doing something that they never intended on, of course, doing. And they were being exploited with that, and somebody was profiting off of it. And literally, when you take all of those words, you're basically describing the definition of what we called human trafficking. Just back then, I didn't know that there was this big word that would be the umbrella to encompass everything that was going on. And I wanted to share their stories, because I started putting myself in their shoes. I started thinking about what it would be like if I was 15 years old, 16 years old, 13 years old, and how the rest of the world would see me and for me, I was watching on the streets, right? And today there's many different areas where trafficked victims are found, whether it's in a micro brothel, like I'm sitting in a condo right now, and a lot of condos in cities across our nations, both of ours. And I say both of ours because you're in the US, but I know you're Canadian as a sidebar. So our nation is still like the one nation, but you're in the US. So I'm going to, for clarity, just be saying back and forth, right? But when you look at condominiums across, our countries, and that function like micro brothels, or in the back of a restaurant that is fronting like a restaurant or a laundromat or whatever, right? Whatever establishment that it is. And, you know, I wanted, in hearing their stories and putting myself in their position, I vowed to myself saying, if that was me, I'd be praying that somebody be coming for my rescue. I'd be praying that somebody would be telling my story. I'd be praying that somebody would see me as a victim and not as a whore, not as a slut, not as a survival of the fittest, not as she must have made some really bad decisions, not that she's, or she must be doing what she needs to do to provide for her family,
Right.
which I think is the lamest, and I don't know if I'm allowed swearing on your podcast.
Oh,
I
yeah,
apologize,
that's
but
fine.
okay. Like, I think it is the shittiest excuse in society, where we have literally failed our daughters from a government standpoint, where it's like, well, have you done everything before you can get other support? You know, and it shouldn't be an option in order to put food on your table, that this needs to be considered.
Right.
And again, you know, we're talking about, for me, 13, 14, 15 years old. Like, that's not, that's just never, that's never a choice, number one. But I wanted to change that dialogue. I wanted to share their stories. And I truly believe that we all have a voice. So I really don't like the term being a voice for the voiceless. I believe that we all have a voice, and that there are voices that are being silenced, and their voices were being silenced, and I wanted to amplify that. And I just vowed to myself, there was one day in Waikiki, I was sitting watching a sunset on the beach, and I was sitting in the sand, and I promised myself that as long as I had a voice, that's exactly what I was going to do. I wanted to amplify their stories. And I had no idea what it was going to amount into at all. And, you know, I went on this 7-year journey, which, you know, if we can unpack that however you would like, but I went on a 7-year journey. I moved to Vancouver from Hawaii, and then which is in British Columbia. And then I moved to Sydney, Australia. Then I came back to Vancouver. And I finally, when I came back to Canada in about 2009, I wanted to understand at that point, like, really, what is Canada doing to fight this issue? And looking at governments, what are we doing? And there was a really disconnect. There was organizations, front lines, that were taking in and like rehabilitating victims of trafficking and providing, if you will, like a safe house for these victims. But the education and the awareness component of this happening in Canada and even the United States was like almost not existent. And I'm a firm believer that you can't fight something that you're not aware exists, number one.
Right.
And number two, you're not going to give any amounts of money to an issue or a problem, one, that you don't think exists, but two, you also don't understand. Right. And so that for me was like the biggest gap, was how do we educate Canadians that this is happening here at home and we have to do something about it? And once that component's in place, the funding will hopefully come. And that's where you're going to be able to really tackle this issue, which now is a $150 billion global issue.
Right. Let's talk about that, the scope of this issue, because when I first heard you speak, I was like, I gasped. I couldn't believe it, especially when you said that it was 37 million people that live in Canada, right? 37 million people.
Yes. Yeah. Our population. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then there's 40 million people involved in human trafficking.
Yeah. So today, globally, there is over 40 million people in some form of slavery, whether it's sexual exploitation, forced labor, chattel bondage, debt bondage, organ trafficking. The vast majority, though, is around sexual exploitation and forced labor, especially in Canada and the United States. Those are the two most prevalent forms of human trafficking. And 80% of those victims are women and children. And, you know, just to put it into perspective, you know, we shared about Canada. We've got, 37 million people, and there's over 40 million people in slavery. for, my American friends, it's like putting the entire state of California in
Yeah.
slavery, right? Like
Yeah.
every single person. And the most overwhelming thought for me is imagining like every single person in the state of California, every mom, dad, brother, sister, children, old person, every single person is in some form of slavery, and the world doesn't notice
Yes.
all those people, right? Like it's happening right here at home in the United States. 300,000 victims are domestically trafficked, meaning they are American. It's not international. They're not coming from Southeast Asia. They're not coming from Eastern Europe. They're not coming from Africa. Does that happen in both countries? Yes, it does. But we have a homegrown problem. 87% of victims rescued in Canada are Canadian. And so this is a huge issue. And across both of our borders, the average age of entry into forced prostitution is 13, 14 years old. And that's where I go back to the choice, where at 13,
You
when
don't have a choice.
that's not a choice. Yeah. And again, that's the average, which means in order to keep that number that low, means you have to have so many that are 9, 10, 11, 12 years old to keep that average that low.
Gosh, it's appalling.
It is. Yeah, it is very appalling.
There's a mechanism in place here that's keeping people in a state of, and I say this quite often on the podcast, especially lately, almost like in a state of cognitive dissonance, where that they do not want
100%.
to accept this as being real. But I mean, there's 800,000 missing kids in America every year. 800,000. And I know there's a lot of like custody stuff and, it becomes muddled, but that should be our number one priority.
100%.
Figuring out where in the hell are these kids?
Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
So, it's not what we think it is. And I found that really interesting, because when we start looking at how this stuff happens, we have to think about, well, why is it happening? Right. And it's money, right?
Oh, big time. I mean, like when I first started, so I founded an organization in 2010 called Freedom. And, that's the other part. When I came back, it was an initiative at the time. And now we're a nonprofit organization going on 11 years. Our birthday was just this past January.
Congratulations.
And, when I look at Canada back in 2009, 2010, the statistic was, it was a $32 billion industry, 32. And today it's 150 billion. And so there's many questions that when you talk about cognitive dissonance, as to if we know more, we should know better, right?
Yeah.
Right. There's an element that, like, again, like I said, you can't fight that what you're not aware exists. So if you don't know about it, how can you fight it?
Right.
But we do know better.
Yeah.
And yet somehow this is an industry that has continued to grow.
Right.
How is that possible? How is that possible? And I think there's a lot of, people in the world, civilians, that it's easier to go to bed not knowing and facing the reality that maybe the world that we have been living in is not exactly how we've always thought it to be,
right.
Especially when it comes to children, right? Because I would like to believe, and I do believe, that we are born good. We are born through love, and therefore we are born good. Yeah. And it's over time that spirit, that soul, that exposure becomes tainted and can become corrupt. And so in the core of who we all are, to look at children and to see the torture and abuse of, and I mean, even in saying those words, is putting it so mildly compared to what actually happens to these kids in sexual exploitation. Yeah. Who wouldn't want to defend the innocence of a child, And so it's hard for people to stomach a lot of this, just on a basic level, never mind getting really, really deep into some of the other issues that it's not even about going down a rabbit hole. It's just, if you do your research and you are studying a topic, something like this that's very dark, I believe it's the most evil thing on our planet today.
Yeah.
That's exactly what you're going to find is evil.
Yeah. Yeah. I think one focus I want to focus on today as we speak is this mechanism of how this happens, because we have this way of thinking about bad things like, oh, there's boogeymen hiding in the bushes and they jump out and they grab us. And that's how this evil happens, right? This is how people are attacked. And we got to stop thinking like that, because
Right.
most evil hides in plain sight.
Beyond, like, beyond. If 2020 wasn't a demonstration of that, not that this is what this podcast is about today, our conversation, but 100%,
Yes. Yes, and it's
100%,
the best place to hide, right
totally.
in front of your face, because then you get the response that everybody says, which is, "It's unbelievable. It's just
Yeah,
unbelievable." And
yeah,
then they move on, right?
sure.
But the mechanism in the way that they do this, as I was learning from you, in your talk that I listened to, was, these are friends bringing in friends.
Hmm.
These
Yeah,
are these are very intricate little systems that they've put in place, and they're really quite smart about the way they go about getting these kids.
yeah.
Um, and so let's talk about that a little bit. Who's targeted? Where are they targeted? And
Hmm.
how are they getting them in?
So I've always said that wherever you have poverty and vulnerability, you're susceptible to human trafficking, to fall victim. And I don't care what country, what color, what faith system, what gender. If you are in a situation of poverty and vulnerability, that's the two strongest to fall susceptible. If you're in poverty, you still can fall victim. And if you're vulnerable, you can still fall victim. And what do I mean by that is, when you look at Canada, for example, our most marginalized communities are Indigenous communities,
Yep.
some of the most impoverished in the nation, and they are the most affected amongst victims of trafficking that still even go unreported in the media. Like when there's the missing murder 500, and there's still not an acknowledgement, even with those that are rescued around the Indigenous community. But when you look at the poverty, that becomes an opportunity for predators, for pimps, for traffickers to go into a community and offer a promise of food, of shelter, of a job, to make a lot of money. And if you're in a situation where you don't know where your next meal is coming from, or you haven't had shelter over your head, or you have abuse at home, that could be the result of being in poverty, that is going to be a hope that you might just take it to exit.
Right.
On the vulnerability side, it could be a girl that goes to a private school, comes from an affluent community, but is the girl that's always overlooked. She's timid, she's insecure. She might be even in the popular crowd, but like I said, there's insecurities around this girl that makes her feel vulnerable. Maybe she's not in the popular crowd, and that trafficker, that pimp, is going to prey on that vulnerability. There's a common story that we often hear, both in Canada and the United States, around the wooing factor of the boyfriend figure that comes on to prey on these young girls. And, that male is going to be often anytime or anywhere between the ages of 18 to 22, 23, and is going to come on to that girl to single her out, whether it's on her own and making her feel like she is just the most beautiful thing he's ever seen, or if it's in front of a group of friends. The days of us being able to gather and go to malls, go to the movie theater, go to coffee shops, and he's going to single the most vulnerable one out to prey upon that, to say, you're the most beautiful girl I've ever seen. I'd love to get to know you. And he's grooming her. He's wooing her. We'll take her out to buy her coffee, buy her clothes, shower her with praise. at some point it's going to say, you don't need anybody else in this world. All you need is me. I'll take care of you. I can provide everything for you. Do you trust me? I love you. And most girls at that age are probably hearing that for the first time, really, even at that point, when you think of the average age of entry being around 13, 14. And just think about how you felt when you were 13 and 14, and how vulnerable, even if you didn't have vulnerabilities in this sense,
Mm-hmm.
it's like that innocence of being 13, 14 and figuring out, like, what does love mean outside of
Right.
our parents or our family or a best friend?
Mm-hmm.
And now it's coming from somebody else that I'm attracted to, or is showing me affection and showing me what they're telling me is love. And so when you have these two situations, poverty and vulnerability, you're susceptible. And when you put the two of them together, it's going to be the strongest case for that victim.
Right. It's I mean, I started to see how it could happen quite easily, especially if you get a group of girls that,
Mhm.
this is easy money. This is
Yeah.
easy money. And we've heard reports in the press lately over the last year or so of how, like, Ghislaine Maxwell, she would say, "Oh, bring a friend." And
Yeah.
these girls ended up recruiting their own friends in by saying, "Oh, all you have to do is give this guy a massage and you get $50 or whatever." And there's
Yeah.
such a focus with social media, Instagram and whatnot, on materialism, right?
Yeah.
Like, young girls with really expensive purses and really expensive makeup, and that's kind of being showcased on the daily on in places like Instagram. And if
Yeah.
you have no way to get that stuff, and then all of a sudden you have a way, like, I can put it together on how this is being done.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, the other side to that is when it's somebody that or is a friend or somebody that you trust, you also think that what you're being invited into is not going to be per se harmful, or maybe
Right.
as bad as it seems.
Right. You're not
And
thinking, "Oh, I'm going into human trafficking."
right.
Right?
Yeah. And
You're caught.
most of the victims, even still, that get rescued and come out, it's
Yeah.
usually not until a lot later where they realize that that word human trafficking was what was happening to them.
Right.
Even like, I can't tell you, and so many victims will be like, I had no idea that that's what was happening to me.
Right.
And there's so many layers to unpack here, from like the brainwashing that takes place and the psychology of that is broken down around, almost like circus mentality, where if you take a baby elephant
Mhm.
and for its fragile years of its life, you put a fence around it.
Mhm.
I don't know, you'd have to look it up, but it's this whole study that, like,
Yep.
if you put the wire around it for a certain period of time and it goes and it gets buzzed, right? It's learning, like, don't go outside that circle because
Right.
I'm going to get shocked and I'm going to get hurt. Well,
Yep.
there comes a point where you no longer need that, and that elephant will never leave that circle.
That's
And
right.
it is very similar psychology, where these girls are broken down, and they're abused as well, whether it's through sex or physically abused. And I mean, from everything, if you can think it, it's happening, from um, using the curling iron to insert it into areas that you would never want that being blazing hot, to having cigarette burns, to stuff being thrown at you, or you being used stuff to beat you. There's so many things around the abuse that breaks down your psyche. And
Right.
you have to remember, these guys are very, very smart. A lot of it is documented, even with Ghislaine Maxwell, as we see, right? Like,
Yep.
there's so much footage. And that's what we're seeing. You're not seeing the other videos that they have full tapes of. And
Right.
what ends up happening is the shame factor. It's like, if you
Right.
don't do what he
Extorted.
says, it
Yeah.
is. And it's like, if you don't do this, we know where you live. We know who your family is. We know who your siblings are. We're either going to bring them, harm will come to your family, like your siblings,
Yep.
or we're going to blast it everywhere. And if you don't want this on Facebook, if you don't want it going out on Instagram, etc., you're going to do what we're going to say.
Right.
There's oftentimes illegal activity as well, and they use that to blackmail the girls, saying, well, you
You did
partook
this.
in this.
Yeah.
And when you're young, you don't really know any better. And if you also come from a system where you didn't have an education,
Mm-hmm.
and again, when you think of our marginalized communities and across both countries, and where there's more poverty, if you're not in school, going to school, getting an education, you just don't even know things around basic rights, your human rights. And so when somebody says, this is your fault, I know like that wouldn't hold up in the law because I know better. But I was also taught, I had that education. And so there's so much that's weighed on them. And after the months, so a girl can be rented out, anywhere between 15 to 20 times a day is kind of around that average. And when you start doing the math on that, 15, let's use a lower number, times 30 times 365, there's only so much that you can take, and you're constantly being broken down. That part of the invitation to bring somebody else in is to have what's happening to you stop and replacing you, where you almost get promoted to a different status, kind of almost like management, right? Like now that you're bringing in these girls, managing, helping, and so it's really hard to explain the hows to, and how could a girl do this to somebody they know. But there's layers and layers of abuse and breakdown and psychology that just like that, you can only take so much.
Right.
And it's part of survival, right?
Shame isn't a very effective tool too, right? Like the shame of being involved in it, which will make you stay quiet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. I can see the layers of it, but I think that people need to understand that this isn't like a blanket thing where we can just blow people off and say, or blow girls off or blow victims off as like, oh, that's the life they chose. No, no, no. This is so much more complex than that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
And again, I go back to the point of entry. And,
yes,
just even
13 years
because
old.
yeah. And even if there's a girl, in more recent like news articles that come out, or other cases, or like Peter Nygaard for right now, that's like
Yes.
all over the news, right? Like there are girls that are older than the age of 19. And so it's very easy, it's very quick to go, well, she's 19, she chose that. She's 20, she chose that. And I really encourage people to take a step back. And this is where the education component and why we do what we do with Free Them is, just because the girl is 19 now doesn't mean that she wasn't lured or coerced and trafficked or forced back when she was 13, 14, 15, 16. And she's just happened to survive to the age of 21, 22, etc. And so I always encourage people to not be so quick to judge the situation.
Right.
And the more you learn about human trafficking, the most important question is, when was your first time? When was that first time? Because if you were anything under the age of 18, number one, but if you were 13, 14, 15, 16 years old, that is not a choice at all.
Right.
And that we need to remember.
Right. It's an odd dynamic because there aren't too many things in the world that we blame the victim of.
Right.
Right.
Totally.
But,
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah.
Isn't that the truth? Yeah.
But in this case, it feels like that, it's the victim's fault. It's, well, they chose that path. And I love that you explain it the way with being, prostituted, because that's, I mean, you're not having a choice at the age of 13. Right. I mean, there's something missing in your life at that point that you're looking to fill.
Yeah.
And they're exploiting that. They're
Exactly.
exploiting that. So
100%.
yeah, to say that, that's a choice is completely ignorant in my point of view. And but we have to bring more awareness to how it happens, because I do think that people don't understand how it's happening. And if they begin to understand how, then it becomes more relatable, and you can think, holy, that could happen to my kid.
Yeah.
Or someone my kid knows.
Yeah.
And so you have to start looking at it like that. And it's ugly. Holy man, is it ever ugly when you start looking into it.
Well, and I'll just add just a comment to like what you just said. In the days where we were able to be going and speaking in high schools, especially in, the first like 6 years of freedom. I used to speak in so many high schools, and all across different demographics, different cities, different communities, all boys schools, all girls schools. And without fail, every single time I spoke in high school, I had at least one student, even at the all boys school, I had one student come up to me and say, I didn't know that what you were talking about had a title, or like, I did not know that this is what was happening, but I'm pretty sure this is happening to one of my friends right now. And they just didn't know what it was. You just think it's like this bad situation, right? Like you don't realize as a kid or as a child, like I said, many victims don't realize that there was a term, that there was something that actually happened to them, as opposed to them feeling like this was their fault, or that somehow they got mixed up with the wrong people, or, all of the things. But literally I had, every single time I speak in a high school, I have at least one student come up and say, I did not know, but now I know that this is what's happening to my friend. This is what it's called, human trafficking.
Well, I definitely reflected on my high school years as I was learning more about this topic. And I thought, there's some young girls my age that had really old boyfriends.
100%.
And now I
Yeah.
start thinking about that and I'm like,
Yeah.
what was that about? Because like I can remember, being in high school, I didn't even have my driver's license yet, leaving the school or whatever. And some girl I didn't know that well, but she'd get picked up like in some Trans Am with a guy with a beard. And she's like 15.
Yeah.
And now I
Yeah.
look back on that and I think, holy crap, what was that? That's
Totally.
that's not
Yeah.
normal.
Yeah. And I think we all would be able to have that experience as well. Like even myself included, in high school, I had no idea,
Yeah.
Very similar. There's like about 3 girls in my high school that I'm like 100% that's what was happening to them as
Well,
well.
now I'm really
I had no
wondering. I'm
idea.
like, holy, like, cause that at the time I just thought, oh, she's got an older boyfriend. But now I'm like, oh my God, that's really weird.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
how would you feel if that was your kid now?
Totally.
Right? You'd
Yeah.
freak. And I
Yeah.
think that's what we need to start looking at it like is, how is this relatable to me? We've seen
Yeah.
a lot more arrests and stuff in the news lately. And
Yeah.
and do you know why that is? First of all, why are we starting to see this now? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. So it's an interesting question. And I I have 2 answers for that.
Okay.
So in my opinion, just like, I've been fighting this issue since, call it 2003, right?
Yeah.
Like a really long time.
Yeah.
We definitely, from back then to now, have definitely seen the media become more educated. We've seen legislation being passed. We then therefore have seen more arrests. And, there was a period of time where it was like human trafficking is on the rise in Canada. And it's like, it's not that it's on the rise, it's just we didn't see it before.
Right.
The police didn't address it with the lens they do now, and having the training. And now that they know what to look for, it's very different. And also now that they have certain legislation to support being able to arrest, that also changes things. The ability to be able to go in and lay charges and to make these arrests. So there is part of it where when you have more support through legislation and media, you're going to see that. It's also the factor of like, I don't know what the word is, but when you're shopping for a red car and you never see red cars, and now
Right.
because you're shopping for a red car, you just see red cars everywhere,
Right.
right?
Awareness.
And that always happens.
Yeah.
And this happens a lot where somebody will say like, I heard you speak, or like, I saw this movie and it really struck me. And like, it's crazy. It's all over the media now. And it's like, it's not that it's all over the media now. It's just you're noticing it now, And so for me, when I hear you say that, it's like, it's a little bit of column A and column B. It's like your eyes are open to seeing it more. So you notice it more.
Right.
And yes, there are more arrests that are taking place, but they also go like this in waves. Like if you look at what happens in either of our countries, the US more than Canada, will do these sweeps and do different sting operations. And when that happens, there's major arrests and busts. And then things kind of go quiet for a while. And then there's like another series.
Right.
And so it's kind of for me like a little bit of column A and column B, if that is
No, that
fair
makes
to
sense.
say. Yeah.
That definitely makes sense. I think one thing that's brought, because I've been aware of it for quite some time, but I didn't know how big it was. I didn't know, the scope of what was actually happening, until recently. But also, there's been all this Hollywood stuff going on
Yeah. Yeah.
surrounding it,
Yeah.
and I think that is. I don't know. You'll have to tell me what you think, but in some ways, I think it hurts the movement. In some ways, I think it brings awareness to it,
Sure.
because there's 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 some group of people that are just adamant in protecting these Hollywood people. They want to see them in the light of how the characters they play in the movies, the songs they sing. They want to put these people up on a pedestal and think that they're just great people.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's that group that's like, oh, that's, conspiracy theory stuff. And that's not true. That's not happening. And then there's the other group who, because these people are involved, they're starting to actually pay attention to it.
Right. Yeah.
So how do you see that? And what's your personal, opinion about this stuff? Are you one that's like, oh, that's kind of conspiracy theory stuff? Or do you think that some of the most high profile people that we see and that we elevate and have elevated for years
Yeah.
are involved in pedophilia and human trafficking rings?
Yeah. It's a very loaded question.
I know it
Um,
is.
and there's a lot. I feel like I have a 22-minute answer. Um, okay. Um, I think that one, human trafficking is the users, the Johns, the purchasers of human trafficking, um, no limits or no boundaries. I don't care what vocation you're in, what level you're in. We have seen time and time again from
Mhm.
people who literally from taxi cab drivers to doctors to lawyers to politicians
Mhm.
on all sides of the parties. Okay. In Canada,
Yep.
we have a
Yep.
way more complicated government
Right.
than in the US in terms of Democrats, Republican.
Right.
So I'm just going to say all of the parties. We have seen presidents and prime ministers in the world
Mhm.
be involved with purchasing sex. And this isn't something that just showed up in 2020.
No.
Right? So we have seen in faith communities from the Catholic Church, who is unfortunately notorious for pedophilia as it usually pertains to young
Boys.
males
Yeah.
and boys. We have seen forced marriage. And if people don't know what that is, it's when you are taking a 6-year-old, an 8-year-old, a 10-year-old, and you are literally marrying them off where a family is being paid to sell their daughter to a man.
Right.
And I mean that in every sense of the word. And we see that in Africa, in the Middle East. And so we have to take a step back from it's a really big word to use, this word conspiracy theory, and it goes into cognitive dissonance again. Prior to 2020, all of this was already still happening, everything I just said.
Yep.
And even for us, like as an organization, I am careful about, of course, what we say and what we don't say, because we have built a credibility for going on 11 years. We've helped to amend the criminal code in Canada 3 times. We're federal, provincial, and municipal stakeholder to our governments here, advising on human trafficking on all different issues. We know survivors. We've seen the street level. There's 4 different really tiers around who is a pimp and a trafficker, and like those rings.
Right.
It's not just there's been, and I think this is what you were asking about, if it hurts the movement, because there has been an over, an overreaching and an over focus, if you will, on just like these celebrities and the
Right.
elites.
Right.
And there's a dismissal that human trafficking happens any
in
other
your
way.
community.
Yeah. And meanwhile it does. And it happens a lot through, the abuse. Again, when you're looking at a 9-year-old who makes up part of why that average is so low, that's oftentimes not a stranger. That's oftentimes a grandma, a mother, a father, an uncle, a brother, a sister. As horrendous as that is for you to accept, that's the reality, is that 9-year-old, unless they're in the foster system, that's a whole other story.
Right.
But if they have a guardian or they have a family and that abuse is happening, it's usually happening in some form of their home or through online abuse as well. Cyber sex trafficking is very common, through pornography, etc. So there are these different layers that, yes, it's happening, and it's happening by some of the most powerful people that we know or don't know.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at when you take, for example, I'll throw out a name. This guy, John of God, okay, who is known down in South America as a
healer or something. Yeah.
Yeah. He's known as a healer.
Uh-huh.
He's also very good friends with Oprah. That's not my story. That's their stories.
Right.
You can go Google that, she's gone down to go see him. She considers him a close friend. They're very huggy kissy. And in 2019, the New York Post reported of alleged sex trafficking rings. And that doesn't just get fabricated and come from nowhere, right? Like, and this is where we go to say, I always say, like, when people show you who they are, pay attention.
Right.
So there's a difference in like throwing slander on the wall, kind of like the Italian spaghetti, throwing at the wall and seeing if it sticks.
Right.
Okay. When something like that gets thrown against a person, we need to go, why is that happening and where is that coming from, and go and analyze that.
Right.
And it was huge. And in my opinion, there's no question about the validity, whether he was or was not undergoing sex trafficking and abusing children, at the very least. Okay.
Yep.
The question then becomes, why is somebody like him so close with somebody like Oprah?
Her. Yeah.
And I love Oprah. I have for a very, very long time, right? Like I love Oprah. But the question is, if he is this type of person and you're that close with him, there's a good chance what he's up to. And how could you hug somebody, be with somebody like that? And that becomes the bigger question. And then when you look at the rest of who their friends are, Harvey Weinstein.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah. And there's endless amount of footage, and I don't want to just like pin it back on Oprah. This isn't actually
it's just
not
an
about
example,
Oprah.
because we can do this about a lot of people.
And so I think that even like when you look at Jeffrey Epstein and who his friends were and who hung out with them, and they all know, there are senators that have gone on national television to say, we all knew what he was doing. This isn't Shae's opinion. This is not, me trying to create the narrative that serves me, because it doesn't serve me at all, period. Number one. Right. Like it only like riles up a whole bunch of people to try to come after me and like hate me for just reciting something that's on national television. It's not me.
Right.
You can go do your own homework, but they all say, or she says, that they all knew what he was doing. And so the question is, how could you be friends with somebody who is doing that type of level of abuse, exploitation, and torture?
Right. Unless it's a known thing that's just kind of accepted, been going on for decades. And this is just part of like being part of Hollywood.
Yeah. And there are people who have literally been murdered by suicide, is what I call it.
Yeah.
Over trying to expose this. And one of the places I recommend people to start is with Isaac Cappy.
Right.
There's so much footage of
Yes.
videos of him even documenting, I was threatened today, I was threatened yesterday, I'm probably not going to be alive by next week. And when they tell you I'm depressed, know that I'm not depressed. How
Right.
more clear could he be about what he knew was coming?
Right.
And he's just one example. And I don't want to turn this into like a rabbit hole conversation,
Right.
but you know, I really think when you start, that's one section. Then when you look at Hollywood and you look at Disney and you look at the sexualization of children that takes place at a very young age, when you look at you know, different movies like The Little Mermaid and the priest has a boner in it, to The Lion King and sex is spelt out, to phallic symbols, to all kinds of things that are highly inappropriate, you know, even with you know, we saw last year, even recently, where it was that troll that, you know, when you touch her private part,
And that
he
was on the
giggles.
shelves in
Yeah,
Walmart as a
right.
toy.
And the company came out and said that they had no idea and that it was not intentional. And it's like, well, that's complete bullshit, because in order to manufacture something, there's like blueprints. It's like saying you didn't
There's
know.
prototypes. You worked on that for months. You're telling me you just came up with it out of nowhere and put it on the shelf to
Exactly.
sell? That's
And how many people are involved in that? It's like building a house. You need the engineer, you need the architect, then you build the framework, and then it has to pass inspection in order for you to be able to, first you got to get the permits, then you got to get past the inspection to be able to let those people move into the house. It's no different than any product. It's like, here's what the toy is going to look like on the computer generated, the schematics of it, the engineering of it. Then it needs to get put together, and then you freaking test all the toys. You test the products over and over again.
I know. But it's this hiding in plain sight, like we've said before. It's this, and then there's this compliance to that effect that is just says, oh, well, why would they do that? That's unbelievable.
Yeah. You know, and I think that's where, again, people don't want to acknowledge that we live in a world, and I don't want to even acknowledge it. Like, that's not a beautiful, comforting thing to think that at any given point, your children are being targeted and are being desensitized to sexualization or the invasion on their own bodies or seeing somebody else's, right? Like, we posted on our Free Them website not too long ago on our blog of a show in Denmark that is a cartoon, and it's for children. And it's about this adult man that uses his enormous penis to solve things in the community. And you're like, how is that even allowed on TV, where you put, literally, when you say the word children, an enormous penis, that should never, ever be allowed to go together. And yet this is a show that kids are supposed to watch, and it's catered to kids in the show too. It's not like it's The Simpsons, where it's like, it's a cartoon, or South Park, where it's like really adult humor, but like a lot of kids watch it. This is like a kid's show. And yet it's allowed and it's happening. And so it's like, there's so many things within the movies, Disney, that have come out for a long time that expose children to sex, and that the idea of having an adult in that sexual encounter, I refuse to call that a relationship, because it's fucking not. But that encounter, that it's okay, and that it's giggles, and that it's okay to feel good, and that it's accepted, or that it's not, you know, that it's allowed and it's not wrong. And so, you know, even another, you know, and again, I'll give one other kind of example of people, and, you know, some people might hate me for it, but again, I think when people show you who they are, you should pay attention. There is a video that Tom Hanks thought would be really funny to put together that aired on Jimmy Fallon's show. And it's called Sexy Baby Beauty Pageant. Right there, just the title If
Weird.
you think babies are
Weird.
sexy, that's
Yeah.
fucked up.
Yeah.
Straight
That's
up.
weird.
If you
Yep.
think babies are sexy, or that a baby could be or should be called sexy, that's fucked up.
Yep.
And this is the title of this. And he actually uses his own daughter in the video. You can go on YouTube or maybe on BitChute. Maybe it was removed from YouTube because, you know, they're removing everything that they don't want us to actually see.
Yep.
So you might have to go there. But if you put in, it's the sexy baby pageant, Tom Hanks with his daughter, and he's teaching her how to, win the beauty pageant. So she's in this like little tutu and all of these things. And he ends up going and showing her how to move her hips and how to dance and how to basically be sexy. And then up on stage at one point when she's doing the beauty pageant, he's telling his daughter, he's in the audience. And, you know, like if you were at a school play and mom's in the row and she's like lip syncing the words to her child.
Yeah.
So he's doing this. He's in the audience and he's telling her, but like lip syncing, the words are talk dirty to me, baby. That's what he's telling his freaking daughter, who doesn't look more than the age of like 6 to 8. Talk dirty to me, baby, as she's like being sexy and she's putting out her like, little hips and she's wiggling around in her little tutu and saying, talk dirty to me, baby. Who's she supposed to be talking dirty to? You're like 6 or 7 or 8 years old.
And that's supposed to be funny?
And that's supposed to be funny, okay, to sexualize and it's your child. That's your daughter. I never would put my own child up on stage like that, to say that, to act like that. No. And again, it's sexy baby. And of course, because this is on Jimmy Fallon, you can hear the audience is laughing, right? Like as they're showing it, you can hear it in the background. And this is a prime example of them showing you in plain sight and making a joke about it. There's another video I saw recently of another comedian and, this is like a little too far-fetched. I'm not going to explain the video, but he's talking about Hillary Clinton and some things that Hillary Clinton has or hasn't done. Mm-hmm. And he makes a full joke about it, about being like, what are we, like vampires now in Hollywood? And everyone's laughing. Yet there's truth behind every joke. There's a reason why.
Why are you laughing? Why is that funny?
Right. Like there's a reason why it's being put out there.
Yeah.
And so, there's the whole saying, you're innocent until proven guilty. Yes. Mm-hmm. But there's enough reason to believe that.
Right. Why don't we just shake it all down? If it's so conspiracy theory, crazy out there, unbelievable. Well, okay, let's just put it to bed forever then. Let's just shake it all down and see where this really is. Right.
Totally.
And then we can just call out all the conspiracy theorists for who they are.
Yeah. And I think like between like freedom of speech and freedom of the press, the moment that things start getting yanked off the internet, and it happens to be around all of these topics and more, but like we're talking about this topic. So, when things start disappearing, it really makes you go, why do you care if it's not true?
Right.
What's it even matter? Right. Like if it's not true, like, then who cares? Let people figure that out for themselves.
Yeah,
when have you ever cared so much about making sure that the truth is out there? Because literally we've been lied to our whole lives. Like smoking is good for your health. Like look at the ads back in like, the 50s where doctors smoke Camels, to like glyphosate is good for you, like we've been lied to over and over again. So like why all of a sudden now is it so hyper concerned that like we need to live in this utopia where only truth comes out? It's like, you guys have never been concerned about that before, but now all of a sudden 2020, you guys give a shit about that. Like I question that. And I encourage
and any
people,
sane person I think should.
And even if you're not sane, you still should. Like I think, like we should be questioning everything and asking why. What is the reaction that they're expecting from us? What is the move they want us to do? What do they want us? Why do they want us to believe certain things or not certain things?
Right.
And so it's a loaded question. Do celebrities in Hollywood buy sex that's underage? Yes, they do. Is there a massive human trafficking ring around adrenochrome and, you know, all kind of that? Nothing surprises me in the realm of human trafficking. There's so many things I could say around Sandra Bullock talking about facial cream that's taken from penises. Okay. How the question is, how do you get that?
Right. Who invented
How do you
that?
get that?
How would you
Because
even,
like,
how would,
what mothers are giving their newborn babies penises, the skin, the blood? Who's giving their newborns parts like that so Sandra Bullock can have that in her face lotion? And it was this big joke on Ellen. And, you know, and again, you can go Google it. Go Google it. It's not, this isn't my narrative. Like it's on Google. And, you know, and she talks about this face cream and it makes you question. And there's many other celebrities that have talked about these face creams as well, you know? And so I think there's a lot more there that has not been unpacked. And
like I said, let's just look into it. Like, I don't, it's pretty infuriating to me when we have photos that, you know, okay, if they're doctored, let's go ahead and prove they're doctored. Cause don't you want to clear your name?
Right.
You know, like recently Hunter Biden's laptop photos were shown. He shows him with young girls scantily clad in outfits that, you know, are just like, whoa, you would never dress a child in that. We're talking about thigh-high stockings and things of that nature. And then it just gets completely shoved underneath the rug. Like it can we not just like, okay, fine. If it is doctored photo, okay, let's address it though. Right? I mean, why is there no investigation into this stuff? It's infuriating and everybody should be outraged.
Yeah. Well, you know, I mean, when you look at the people, and I'll just go back to Harvey Weinstein and Jeffrey Epstein, when you go back to the people they're friends with, who have been alleged involved, you know, yeah, right now they've not been charged with anything.
Right. They're all above
you
the
know,
law.
they're alleged, right?
Yeah.
Right now they're being accused, conspiracy theory, etc. But to your point, when you look at those people, when you're in a position of power and wealth, you can make anything go away. And again, when I look at the advancement of how many more people are in slavery today versus 10 years ago, to how many more billions of dollars the industry profits versus 10 years ago, if we know more, we should do better. And we're not. Like, that number should be a lot lower, in my opinion. Between like legislation that would support harsher sentences and cracking down on companies that are bringing in manufactured goods from second and third world countries, and that if there's slavery in those products, right, that afford them the huge profit margins that they have, why are we allowing those products in Canada and the United States? Only like in the past like 8 months has Canada started to consider how to police that, like how to make sure that if your products are coming into Canada, that they don't have child labor in them, or forced exploitation, or just slavery, like across the board, you know, people not getting paid. There's a lot of money. And when you have a lot of money, you can pay those decision makers, those legislators and the prosecutors to turn away. You can pay the Crown attorneys. You know, and I'm not saying that obviously every single person in the legislature is like that. Of course. You know, we do have a lot of good people, but again, even those good people, there's a lot of pressure. And even if they're not accepting bribes like money, there's also a lot of fear. If you don't go the other way, you know, this will happen. And, you know, we saw cases like that this year. It's like you start poking your nose in certain business and all of a sudden that person's suicided, you know? And that's where I say to people, like, really, if you want to do some research, like look at all of the people who have committed suicide that are influential, that are in Hollywood,
And their
that have
connection.
certain positions, the connection,
Yeah.
and literally it all leads back to a handful of powerful people. And the question is why? Why did that person who sat on a board or was a committee to this or whatnot, why did that person commit suicide? And when you see like it's the same people show up at the end,
Yep.
um, that's a huge question mark for me. And
Yeah.
so I'm not
I think
saying
it
that it
is for a
is.
lot of people now. And this is what I'm
Yeah,
saying, that like what I, when everyone's aware of it, right? And it becomes kind of a joke. I mean, look at Jeffrey Epstein when he was killed. I mean, it became literally a viral joke. Epstein didn't kill himself. Epstein, and everybody pointed to the Clintons, right?
right,
And it became a household joke.
right.
At this
Yeah,
point, can we just not look into it? Like
yeah,
what and that's where everybody comes into play, where, they can't kill us all. They
right.
can't kill us all. So if we're
Yeah,
all questioning it and saying, what's going on here? What's going on? Is there anybody that doesn't even think at this point that this warrants looking into,
yeah, yeah,
that's not associated with it or benefiting from it?
yeah.
Right? I mean,
I agree.
it's mind blowing to me how this continues to go on. People like Chris Cornell, Anthony Bourdain, Chester Bennington. I don't know what they were doing in their endeavors in life or whatever, but it has been suggested that they were looking into this issue.
Same with Avicii. He released a video. It's all about human trafficking, and then he committed suicide, like
Right.
OD, right? There's a lot of people.
Well,
There's
it's
rumors
easy. It's
about
easy to OD someone in the music industry, right? Because we accept that pretty hook, line, and sinker. Like, oh, they're
right,
musicians, so must be a drug overdose. Or, for Anthony Bourdain, he wrote Kitchen Confidential, which he admittedly talks about his drug use and stuff, but he had turned his life around. Like, I don't know. I'm not saying that this all this is the way it is, and it was all that they were killed or whatever. But I'm saying, can we look into this?
yeah. Well, it's easy, right? Because when it's a suicide, it's a closed book.
Yep.
It's personal, right? And that's where it gets dismissed. And that's where I encourage people, like if you start just making a list of, even in the past like 2 years, of all the people that either had an accidental death,
Mhm.
or were suicided, and that's literally how I call it, because I'm like, they didn't commit suicide. I truly believe they were murdered by suicide, so I call it
Right.
suicided.
Yep.
And if write down all of those names and then just start doing some homework, you just start to see
Yeah,
commonalities,
you can
and you
start
see a
connecting the
narrative.
dots.
Yeah, you do.
Yep.
And so, but it just gets buried.
Yeah.
And right now we don't have media that is practicing proper journalism. And,
Right.
we've seen that.
And that's been a slow rollout for many decades,
Sure. Yeah.
purposefully. But now we're at a point where it's like, holy crap, I don't think anybody believes anything they hear on the news anymore.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
kind of like, okay, yeah, whatever. And then you seek out information, go straight to the source and try to find websites where that story could have came from. And that's kind of, and it's intentional. There's so much news out there right now. We're
I
being
know.
bombarded.
Yeah. I,
Bombarded. There's no way any normal human being who has a life can keep up with what's going
no.
on, and that's very
Yeah.
purposeful.
Yeah.
Because this issue in particularly, I feel like is desperately trying to be hidden. Desperately.
I
There's a
agree.
level of desperation behind covering this stuff up that I don't think we've ever seen before.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, to change gears a little bit, I want to talk about the good side of your organization, Free Them, and what it's like for recovery from survivors of this. You're talking about young kids coming into this, and maybe even staying in it for several years and becoming an
Mhm.
adult through
Yep.
this process. So, what
Yep.
does what does it look like when they come out, and how do they pick up the pieces?
hmm So, Free Them, just to give you the breakdown, we focus on all things to do around preventative measures to fight human trafficking. So, anything on the awareness side, education side, from campaigns to speaking engagements to community events, online events, to legislative work, we focus on all things around prevention, and then we partner with organizations that are taking in and caring for victims of trafficking. So, and through our different events that we do, throughout the year, the default is, we raise funds. And so some of those funds are directed to the different frontline organizations. So, kind of speaking on their behalf, not directly with like our work, it's it's another complex, not, of course, one size fits all. There's so many different variables.
Right.
And the state of which, when a victim does get rescued and comes into a safe house, there's three different kind of stages of housing, if you will, from the immediate short term, which is kind of like the emergency rescue side. And some safe houses, those girls can stay there for anywhere from like a month, 3 weeks, up to about a year. And then the goal, is to be able to put them into transitional housing, where that's really like the deeper healing work, beginning and relearning even life skills. A lot of these girls, again, if you're 13, 14 years old, and you've been exploited for this long, you forget or haven't had the opportunity to learn basic things like how to put together an outfit if you were going to go get a job, right? Like things that you and I take for granted, of knowing how to do that, how to properly greet somebody, because oftentimes these girls are, very timid and have been controlled to the point where it's like you can't speak unless you're told to speak. And so body language is very inwards and looking down, as opposed to, of course, if you're in an interview, you need to look that person in the eye. You need to, when you shake their hand, you're looking at them in the eye. So like basic things of life skills that also need to be relearned. How to budget, like getting in rent from your income, and how to allocate having different expenses. So there's a journey there, and some girls, can be there for a year, depending on the safe house. Some safe houses will allow you to be there up to 2 or 3 years. And then there's like more long-term housing, which is kind of like being on your own, but still being attached to like your parent, so it's more independent living, where you have to pay rent, you have a job, and the safe house helps you with that. And it's, of course, it's not like full amount, it's subsidized, but the idea is, again, is that notion of getting yourself back up onto your feet, and
Or probably on their feet for the first time in some cases.
and in a lot of cases,
Yeah.
and many girls, or many times I would say, you relapse, whether it's emotionally, physically, like, and so there's a lot of trauma. And as much as, you go through this rescue period, for many of the girls, they'll tell you that their healing journey is really going to be for the rest of their lives. And at any point, that you could say a word, you could smell something, you could see something, and you're just very triggered, right? And we all have that, right? Like where we'll smell something and it brings us back to a trip that we were on, or like you'll be like, oh, I can smell the ocean right now, so you think of like that place, right? So like we experience that on a day to day. So you can imagine when you've gone through something that's so traumatic, that there can be something that you see, encounter, smell, feel, even colors, food, that will just trigger you. And so there's the healing journey, is always going to be evolving. So, but there are many survivors that, that I know, that I call them thrivers. I think there's so much more than just surviving, but they have really, I call it the butterfly effect, where, they were as a caterpillar in being trafficked and going through this cocoon period where it was so dark and hard and tough. And that struggle of the butterfly is part of their rescue story, right?
Right.
And through that struggle, you have that transition into a whole new beautiful being, this whole new entity. And so I have a handful of those thrivers that are really like, butterflies for me,
Yeah.
and seeing what they're doing now and going on to literally some of them changing the world. And sitting on different global committees, whether it's for the UN and speaking at the UN, at the advisory councils for survivors of human trafficking on a global level. So
Wow. And
we
that's
have.
truly what it's all about, right? Is using your story. I mean, if you have to endure something so absolutely horrific, then turning it into something that is inspiring to others and
Yeah,
to, use your story for some good is
yeah.
what it's all
and
about,
and
right?
if that's what you want, like,
Yeah.
there's survivors that we work with,
I'm sure they just want to be done and for
yeah, who are like, I'm done telling my
I'm
story because that
healed.
was in the
Yeah.
past, and they want to talk about how they're thriving,
Right.
and what they're doing now. And some of them that is giving back, and some of them have their own non-for-profits, and they are kind of passing on the baton of wanting to see other girls come out of what they went through,
Right.
but they want to tell more of that story than their story.
Yeah.
And that's also a beautiful thing when they get to that point where they themselves know the value, their worth
Mhm.
is beyond what happened to them, and that they really are so valued in who they are as a whole, and so yeah, we have girls that are doing some amazing things right now.
Yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
think you're doing an amazing thing, Shay. I mean, what an inspirational story you have. Just being that aware at such a young age that something horrific was going on, and then taking it and doing something positive to try to change it. That is so inspiring to me. It's
Thank you.
amazing what you're doing.
Thank you.
Where can people connect with you?
Yeah, you can join us on Instagram. It's free them, so free underscore them underscore, and then join us on Facebook as well. You can go to our website, which is freethem.ca. Sign up for our newsletter. They only come out once a month, so we don't spam you, bombard you. So those come out once a month, and it'll give you a good perspective on like what's happening.
Yeah.
Around the world, but of course, Canada and the United States are kind of like the two main focuses here.
Mhm.
So you can be in touch with us that way. You can connect with me on Instagram. It's just my first and last name. Both may be complicated to spell, but just Shae Invidiata. So you can find me on Instagram, and then on our Free Them one too. And we send out a lot of stuff on our Instagram platform. So that's like one of the most active places if you're wanting to share content. I always encourage people to share 3 things that they've learned with like 5 people, because that's where it starts,
Yeah.
is when you've learned something new, to share it, help us spread that awareness and that education, because the more people know, the more they're empowered to do something about it.
Right.
And so we give you those tools. We make it easy. Just go and share our content. You don't even need to tag us, just go and share it, reshare it, and connect
Right.
locally. There's different organizations across Canada and the United States that are doing great work. You had mentioned BC, like Deborah's Gate, which is part of the Salvation Army. They just rebranded into Illuminate. They're amazing. Polaris in the States, Love 416 or 146. Sorry, we're 416 area code in Toronto, so I always get them. But yeah, Love 146, Not for Sale in the US as well, doing great work. Exodus Cry is another amazing organization. Our Rescue. So find, if you want to support local, support those in your community. Find out who they are, or flip us a DM, and we can always recommend further.
That's awesome, and that's where everything needs to begin, and I'm really a firm believer in that it starts in your own community, and if you haven't had that conversation with your kid, have it.
Mhm. You do. I always say, because if you're not, somebody else is.
That's
If
right.
you aren't having that conversation, somebody else is having that convo with your child. And that's
That should
scary.
scare you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
big time. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Shae, for being on
My
today.
pleasure.
I really appreciate your time. And again, you're a true inspiration.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
If the naturally inspired movement makes sense to you, let's do this together and transform the medical model and help people take charge of their health. Learn more about how you can join the Naturally Inspired movement by going to naturallyinspiredadvocate.com or call me at 970-475-4862.